Welcome everybody back into Nerd Sesh. As always, I'm Carson Brever, and alongside me in person today is Logan Camden, and we have a bunch of amazing basketball to talk about with you all today, but we're going to start with the Lakers closing out the Warriors in Game 6, a vintage, very strong LeBron performance. Logan, what was your biggest takeaway from this?
That's where I want to start, is with LeBron and what he did in this game. A big concern for us, Carson, in these playoffs has been seeing LeBron kick into that higher gear, going into takeover mode, turning into King James, the guy that we know he can be. And we've had concerns of whether he wanted to exert himself on the game, but more importantly, can he exert himself to a King James level, one of the best guys on the floor, one of the best guys on the planet type of level. And I think we saw that in this game. He was very opportunistic. He just had, it felt like complete control over this game in ways that he hasn't in this run. When he got the ball in his hands, he was actively attacking mismatches on offense. That's something that I really liked from LeBron, using that physicality and advantage, or physical advantage, to his advantage, where smaller guys switch on to him. You see Steph Curry and Klay Thompson early in this game backs them down, and anytime he got a smaller guy on him the rest of the way, I know he misses like 2 mid-range jumpers. Those are really good looks for LeBron, those little turnaround fades on smaller guys, but anytime he got that switch, consciously attacking at those mismatches, and then just being opportunistic, hustling, getting out in transition. He has 6 points in transition in this game. He's getting downhill. He has 16 points in the paint. He was opportunistic. He was in control, and he dominated this game, and his jumper was falling too. And LeBron at this age, his jumper's very inconsistent, hit or miss. But when it is falling, he's a real complete offensive player with no holes, where it opens up everything else for him. And then in totality, plus you saw him hustle. I thought we saw great defense, physical, hard play on the rebounds. This is the most complete game I've seen from LeBron in these playoffs, and he was the best player on the floor in this game. And I think that's what the Lakers are going to need for the Lakers to win the title. And so I thought this was very encouraging, because we haven't seen this LeBron before, and we did. And I hope he can sustain this level of play moving forward, because we're going to need this version of LeBron for the Lakers to ultimately win a title.
And the timing is certainly no coincidence on this one, because it comes to the biggest stage of the playoffs so far for us to get the best version of LeBron. But I agree with everything that you laid out, and I think opportunistic is a great way to describe the best version of LeBron that we've seen in these playoffs, because we're not seeing 2015 to 2018 LeBron where he's dominating the ball every single possession. You mentioned this one, 17 of his points come out of the post or in transition. So he is weaponizing his athleticism and his physicality when he has a clear advantage, and that's just where he's most effective right now. But a more downhill LeBron overall is also going to enhance his playmaking impact, and we saw that, finding AD with a lob, creating good looks for shooters. So no doubt, when LeBron is playing like this, it is tough to say that anyone is better than the Lakers, and we haven't gotten this version of LeBron night to night. But another thing that does bode well is he definitely found his jump shot as this series went along. Started shooting reasonably well from deep, and obviously we've seen him relying on that. This game he wasn't. This game he was not playing around. We got bully Bron at his finest. And at 38 years old, dude, there's just no comparison. Like, to be able to kick into a gear where I would say overall he's still a top 10 player alive. This one, he was the best player on the floor with 2 other top 5 players probably on the planet out there. It is unprecedented. We can talk about Kareem in 1985, obviously having an unbelievable finals series. Karl Malone's a guy who was still very effective at that age. But to have this level of versatile impact and physical dominance at 38 years old, potentially in another title run, there's nothing that LeBron can do to worsen his legacy. And that's one of the things that frustrated me about this dialogue, is people were seemingly looking at it from the perspective of, okay, this is a legacy matchup between Steph and LeBron in some ways. Both those guys are playing with house money, dude. Steph just had one of the handful of best seasons of his career at 35 years old, and LeBron at 38 is the best 38-year-old that we've ever seen, and he certainly proved it with authority in this one.
I mean, that's like saying that Michael Jordan washed his reputation by playing for the Wizards or something like that. You're exactly right. I don't think this has any real bearing on the legacy of these two guys, and I think, like you said, LeBron can only build on his legacy at this point. And so on the flip side of this, I don't really look at this as like a tarnish on Steph's resume, or I don't even look at this as a tarnish on the Warriors. I do wonder, and I want to ask you this, as a Warriors fan, Carson, I mean, do you feel like the championship window has closed per se? Do you still think there are things they can do in this upcoming offseason to reload and give this thing another shot?
Potentially. I think that when you look at the Warriors' shortcomings in this run, a lot of it came down to the lack of reliable shot making and offensive creation outside of Steph. And we highlighted that as a concern with how bad Poole had been in the first round against Sacramento, at times seemingly unplayable, and with Klay's erratic shot making. And Klay's always been up and down, but this was particularly noticeable. And obviously in this series down the stretch, you got to point to him as a key reason why they lose. He goes 9 of 42 in the last 3 games overall in the series, 16 a night on 34% from the field. And then Jordan Poole in this series is 8 a night on 34% from the field, 25% from 3. So they never had a chance with those guys playing like that. And we did see the Lakers, I thought, more engaged defensively, guarding the Steph pick and roll better in this game. I think also he was a bit worn down by having to carry such an intense load throughout the entirety of this series. But we also saw why he is still arguably the best offensive engine alive, clearly a top 2 offensive engine alive, with the caliber of shots he was able to create for himself and his teammates with regularity in this one. The Lakers were better, but some of this did come down to shot making, and then the reality that they just always had more options who you could rely on both ends of the floor. But I mean, with the complementary offensive creation, it was very clear too. So big picture, I think they should pay Draymond no matter what. And I understand that there's talk about tension in that relationship and people aren't really sure what's going to happen. But I think Draymond's still a clear top 3 defensive player alive and can bring so much value to this offense, obviously with his short roll playmaking, with his ability to initiate those actions for Steph off ball. There's just not another Draymond Green out there. And I think that he is still quite good at that job. And then I think if you're going to try to move any big piece here, it's probably got to be Klay, because he's expiring. I mean, he's owed $40 million next year. We'll see what his following contract would look like, because you're not moving Jordan Poole. I mean, there's just no way that anybody is taking on that contract right now at the absolute low point of his value. And they do have draft capital that they could attach to a Klay outside of their 2024 first. They have all their first round picks coming up. I just don't really know who that star that they pinpoint would be, because the dynamics around the league are changing, and that, yeah, we've seen a lot more stars who are not content ask out in recent years, and we've seen a lot of teams pushing to acquire those stars. But right now we're in a position where probably like 23, 24 teams in the league are trying to win now. So it's not as easy to pry those stars away, it feels. And the other route, I think, would be you create a package around Kuminga, who I understand, obviously disappointing that he did not play any meaningful minutes in this playoff run, but I still think is a uniquely gifted athlete, a guy with significant upside and potential. And if you are just swinging him for like a really quality wing, like OG Anunoby, who was talked about as a potential target at the deadline, I still think that could make a lot of sense for the Dubs. You lean in on going small, but of course you have the versatility to play those Looney lineups with Dre off the floor. Looney showed his value, obviously, in this playoff run. The guy is a phenomenal player to have in your top 6. And then you're significantly improving the top end of your roster. You're improving your depth, of course, by just not relying so heavily on some of these depth wings, your GP2s, your Dante DiVincenzo's. Not that those guys played poorly, but it's just OG would be like a real big impact kind of guy. And at this point, I just think we've seen the future timeline is cute. It's fun, but you got to go all in right now, because Steph is still Steph, bro. And that's how they won the title last year, obviously, without another top 25 player on the roster. Very good complementary set of players, but it was superhuman Steph. And this year we got superhuman Steph again. And to me, this roster is still close enough. Yes, certainly flawed, but close enough to where you go all in and you continue to make championship kind of moves. And I do think they have the pieces to where that's possible. And I think that maybe the Kuminga for like a real quality two-way wing now route is what makes the most sense.
I definitely think you have to go all in with a guy the caliber of Steph. I mean, you just don't want to waste any prime years. And again, I don't think him getting eliminated, I think you see the way the Lakers were playing him in this series, what a hard, difficult task he had. I mean, like you said, he would have had to have been all-time great, like all-time even better than – Steph was great in this run, but he would have had to have been had an all-time playoff run to get them over this hump with the struggles of the other offensive players around him. Clay, like you said, Poole struggling. It kind of it's kind of surprising to me to hear you say that you think they should move on from Clay. Now, Draymond has a player option, so do you think he opts into that, or do you think he opts out and they try to get a long-term deal done?
It definitely seems like he's going to opt out. So that's what I would expect. And listen, I don't think that they have to move off of Clay, and I don't want to seem like a prisoner of the moment. Obviously, Clay had one of his better offensive seasons of his career this year, like carrying the load for a couple months when Steph was hurt and had some special shot making if you look at like the January month and into February. But he's also clearly not the Klay Thompson of old, not just because he's a bit more erratic offensively. And I mean, even compared to like his prime years, he attempts half the shots at the rim that he used to. And he was never attempting a lot of shots at the rim. So just like that interior scoring is non-existent. And the biggest difference is the defensive decline, I think. And the fact that that was so important to him being like a top 20 kind of player. And he's not that same guy. That doesn't have to be it though. Because Clay is still a special offensive weapon when he's making his shots. It's just a question of, is he at this age worth that value? And I lean no, but I do think I prefer the moving off of a Kuminga, even though I really like him, because Clay's value obviously is in a different league right now, and right now is just what matters more.
You're saying that you would rather move off of Kuminga instead of moving off of Clay. Yeah, I'm 100% with it, and I think if you look at the narrative around the league too, surrounding Golden State, right? Everybody coming off of this title run in last year during the title run, you don't move off of Wiseman. You don't move off of Kuminga. You don't trade those picks in the moment too, because in the moment, a lot of people were saying, I mean, this is a Celtics drafting Len Bias kind of situation where you're reloading, where you get to add another guy who can come in immediately. And instead of doing that, they get a project center in James Wiseman, where you could have traded that pick for, star value at that point. I mean, that pick had so much value. Same thing for Kuminga. Maybe say the same thing for Moody. Now, I think Moody's a rotation piece, and I think they should hold on to him. I thought he was great in these playoffs. I think Dante DiVincenzo is a great bench asset. The issue with that is I do think the Warriors need some outside creation outside of Steph off the ball, and you're entrusting all of that into Jordan Poole, but that's kind of what the Warriors have done by handcuffing themselves to that contract, is you're going to live and die with Jordan Poole. So I think you shop Kuminga. I think you look for the star, because, again, if they don't do that, the narrative throughout this is going to be, what if the Warriors did move off of Kuminga? What if the Warriors did move off of Wiseman earlier if they don't get that other chip? And I think, like you said, man, these title windows come around sparingly. And we saw how close in this run the Warriors were to getting over the hump. I mean, look, I know they get washed by LeBron and the Lakers, and I do think they're just better, but it's not like the Dubs are far off. Like, they're not going to be my title favorites, but the title window is certainly not closed. You retool, you move off of some guys, and I think Kuminga does have real value where I know the Warriors are in the shitter with the luxury tax because they're always up there with money, with the Wiggins deal, with the Clay deal, Draymond, Steph, Poole. Everybody's getting paid, but there are things you can do, and I don't think it's closed, but I think it's going to take a lot of work by the front office to make a lot of moves to get this roster and especially this bench back up to contention.
And just thinking about the specifics of the pass that they could take, the reason I spotlight OG is probably because he's like the best available wing people talk about, but also because of how easy it is to bring that contract into the fold, because it's only $18 million. Now, the problem is you only have one more year of him at that cost. Do you want to give up Kuminga for a guy who I'm not sure how easy it's going to be to extend? And that's a very fair question. But honestly, I mean, is Steph going to be doing this at 38? I don't know. He's doing it right now. I just say chips all in, man. Because look what happens when you go all in, like the LA Lakers just did. And, I mean, the Warriors, obviously, the Wiggins trade and the roster they were able to build last year. I do think we got to give more props to Lakers, though, because this is like as remarkable an in-season turnaround, I think, as there has ever been. You and I have been very high on this Lakers team since the deadline, said they were contenders. Both picked them to go to the Western Conference Finals before the playoffs started. And as great as Braun was in this game, AD has to be the guy who we highlight as the force driving it all, because this is like one of the best defensive playoff runs that I can think of seeing in my life, if not the best. He has completely dominated that end of the floor while also playing some of his best offensive basketball. Obviously not filling the stat sheet as a scorer night to night, but the highs are incredibly high. And it's a special resurgence when you consider who AD has been these last 2 years, where he was consistently unavailable. We saw him completely lose his three-point shot after that was such a lethal weapon for him in the bubble, shooting 38% from deep, the best jump shooting run of his career. All of a sudden, he couldn't make a perimeter shot for 2 years, and he still couldn't make threes this year, but he improved significantly in other ways, having his best rebounding season ever, playing with a different level of overall aggression and a consistency in terms of how dialed in he's been on both ends of the floor. We saw him improve in terms of that touch shot making out of the post, his best season ever there with the floaters and the hooks and the push shots, the turnarounds. And for a guy who theoretically still in the prime of his career in terms of age had fallen out of the top 10 player conversation to come back at the next opportunity where they have a championship caliber roster around him and be this level of a dominant force after the best regular season in years. I mean, we saw 2 different stretches where he was averaging 35 a night with blazing efficiency. Like, this is just awesome to see from AD because he's a guy who I've always felt should go down as one of the 25, 30 best players to play the game. That's what his ceiling is. I think 2020 LeBron and AD is up there for the most dominant single-season duo that we have ever seen. And now he's the one guiding the ship, and I'm very happy for him.
And this is what they planned on when they made this move for AD. This is always how it was supposed to work. You need star power in today's NBA. You need top dogs, and this is the idea. When LeBron slowly teeters off, Anthony Davis takes that ascension to where they are still competitive with LeBron in his older years. And I know this is a take that my dad has had for a while. I think it's kind of foolish. After they got that one chip, and AD has been dragged through the mud, as street clothes, not available, jump shot is off, consistently disappears night to night where he doesn't want to take over. My dad said, I think they made a fundamental misstep by trading for him and by doing the Russ deal. One, getting rid of KCP, Kuzma, invaluable rotation guys like that, but also doing the Pelicans deal where you're getting off of, they move off, it was B.I., it was Lonzo, like
Josh Hart.
Yeah, I mean, those are really valuable rotation pieces, and a lot of people had that same sentiment where they go, man, I don't know, you would have a really good deep rotation around LeBron. You may not have these 2 top 10 guys. I think AD's play kind of wipes that away, and I never had that thought, but a lot of people were thinking that. Anthony Davis has reasserted himself as, a top 10 guy when he had fallen out of that for me. Availability is a big thing in that too, but he is the best, the most impactful defensive player on the planet, and that matters. And he's been, I think if you talk physicality and physical forces in the league, he's up there with Giannis offensively when he's on to me. If you put in rebounding, if you put in how dominant he can be on the low block, like not as a single-man offense, but with guys around him who can handle the ball, I think AD is up there. And, I think he deserves a lot of credit, man. He's had a lot of – AD could have put his head down at any given moment, man, but he persevered, and he got it. It made him tougher. This is the best Anthony Davis I think I've ever seen, too, because I don't even think he was this dominant defensively. He was great, but this is maybe one of the most dominant defensive players I've seen in my lifetime. Anthony Davis is averaging 3.3 blocks per game in this playoff run, Carson. Can you name the one guy who's averaged more since 2000 in a single playoff run?
Dikembe?
Not Dikembe, since 2000.
Well, I was thinking about the 0-1 finals run. Dwight
twice averaged 3.5, but think about that for a second. Dwight Howard was the best interior rim protector, rim force on the planet for a couple of years, wins 3 Defensive Player of the Year awards. Anthony Davis, 3.3 blocks per night, the third most since 2000. And then, if you're just watching the games, you just see how he just takes away so much of what the offense is doing when he's really engaged and can impact the game in so many different ways. AD is the most dominant, I think, defensive force I've seen with my own 2 eyes watching this game. I put him up there with anybody that you can name, and I would say Draymond's probably too. But I think there's a gap there with how AD can just completely take the pain away.
And the distinction between him and a lot of the other great bigs who we think of is how capable he is on the perimeter. The fact that he can shut down Steph on consecutive attempts on a switch to win a game. The fact that he can play that high drop out of the pick and roll and affect the passing lane so much. His hands, I just think, are the most remarkable thing. What's he at? 1.5 steals a game in this playoff run? It's something like just incredibly high for a big. And his all-around defensive impact, I agree, is certainly the best in the league today, and probably the best that I've seen when he's that consistently dialed in. Because like games 4 and games 5, we saw he didn't block a shot across those two. The Warriors started creating better looks at the rim. We saw Wiggins and Dre getting physical and getting good looks down there in game 5, and we saw Steph creating such great looks for guys off the roll in game 4. But that was kind of AD not fully dialed in, and it's such a strange thing about this Lakers team, and I don't know if I've ever seen a team approach a postseason like this where they are just conserving energy and not giving maximum effort in such a high percentage of their games. Like game 5, we came out and it was just like, yeah, I don't think the Lakers are really going to give it their best today. But they come out and game 6 is a really impressive performance. And I do think the other two guys who deserve the most significant shout out here are the guards and the creation that we're getting from them. With D'Angelo Russell and Austin Reeves, obviously, they combined for 42 in game 6. In this playoff run, they're combining for 32 points, 8 assists a night on 56% true shooting. Obviously, there is a bit of a double-edged sword with D'Lo. Sometimes I get frustrated by how reliant they can be on these two guys. But to be your third and fourth best players offensively, it's pretty darn good. And there is an essential element of shot making from the perimeter, of skill, and also of playmaking that they bring that this team was completely lacking before Reeves took his leap, and obviously when Russ was running a majority of those point guard minutes. It's something that the bubble team could only dream of. And when they first made these trades, I thought this team is more talented than the bubble team, but it seemed crazy to say out loud, just given, well, that they hadn't shown it, how they started the season 2-10, obviously. But now I think that that's the truth beyond a shadow of a doubt. I mean, that team won behind the sheer dominance of LeBron and AD just being unbelievable, both top 3 players on the planet, right? Which you've only seen so many times throughout NBA history. And of course, you had good role player production from KCP, Kuz, Caruso. Rondo was actually pretty good in the playoff run, but a lot of those guys have gotten a lot better since that run, I would even say. Kuz obviously is an entirely different player. I think Caruso got better. Like, you certainly didn't have that level of shot creation from anybody other than LeBron and Anthony Davis. To have guys who you can lean on for 20 and 5 any night, they're not going to do it every night, but they're liable to do it any night, is something that makes this team that much scarier as a contender. And then when you look at the all-around defensive ceiling, I think we're in for a heavyweight fight in these Western Conference Finals. And I've felt since the first round that these were the two best teams out West. I had them at 2-3 behind the Suns before the playoffs started. I regret that. The Suns were just not a complete enough team, as we'll talk about. But I've gone back and forth a bit on who I think is the more dominant, the better team. What's just your gut feeling? We'll do a full preview of this series on Monday, but like, just going off instinct, what do you think we're going to see in Nuggets-Lakers?
Instinct, I'd say that I'd probably go Lakers in 7, but I'm just excited at the basketball we're going to get to see in this series. We're getting the best offense versus the best defense. The Lakers, when engaged, have consistently had the best defense in these playoffs. I think still have the highest defensive rating in these playoffs. The Nuggets have the highest offensive rating in these playoffs, and we're getting the best individual players. That's what makes basketball fun, man. Because we get to draw all these judgments off of guys because we're getting these matchups. But again, Jokic is the best offensive player on the planet, I think, and the versatile, the just vastly different amount of ways he can kill you night to night as the dominant scorer. I don't know if you saw that clip with MPJ, man. It killed me on the JJ Redick show when he was like, he came into the training facility and he said that he thought Plumlee was better. And all the teammates go, no, man, Jokic can give you 40 on any given night if he wants to. And he said, I don't see it. Now you're seeing it when he's been forced to, too. Jokic can get buckets at will like that. So just fundamentally, we are getting the best offensive player on the planet and the best offensive team versus the best defensive player and the best defensive team. It's the most picturesque basketball matchup we could have came to. I'm so excited for this, and especially with the matchups that we've seen from AD and Jokic in the past. Jokic has averaged 19, 9, and 5 against AD. A pretty small sample size. I think it's 25 games. The Lakers and Nuggets have one playoff series where the Lakers do win. I think a few big things that are different about this, and we'll get into a full preview like you said. I think Jokic is in better shape. I think this is the best shape I've seen Jokic in his life. So I think physically he'll be able to deal with the toll of the series and the weight on his shoulders moving forward. But also, that was a really poor shooting series from Jokic. I believe he was below 30% from behind the arc. It was just a really bad jump shooting series from Jokic, and there's nothing that AD really did in that series that, had an effect on that. I think Anthony Davis is the best matchup for Jokic on the planet, and is probably going to be able to defend him on the interior better than anybody else. But Jokic is still a great playmaker. I think he's going to shoot better than that run. And so I don't think that, we can just say catch all that Anthony Davis is going to X out Jokic or Jokic is going to completely dominate. This is a immovable object meeting an irresistible force effectively, man. It's tremendous. Now, again, we have the track record, but I think these guys are both much improved from the last time that we saw them meet, and that's why I think it makes this matchup so much more interesting.
I think that Nikola Jokic is a pretty much unstoppable offensive player. I think he's the best player alive right now, and that's a take that I've had at various points over the last couple of years. I don't know that he's ever justified it more than he is in this playoff run where he's averaging 31, 13, and 10 on 63% true shooting. I mean, just in complete control of every single game. And AD probably is the best matchup for him with his length more than anything, I think. But Jokic is still going to largely be able to get to his spots. I mean, he's still going to be able to outmuscle AD. There is a level of touch shot making from him that we've never seen before from a big man in NBA history that nobody can take away. And of course, they're going to be able to single cover him more than some other teams, but nobody's really doubling Jokic with regularity because you just can't. I mean, it is quite literally better to let him get 40 and 8 assists than it is to let him get 30 and 17 assists, because he's going to do one or the other no matter what. The guy, it just has a level of consistent offensive dominance that nobody else in the NBA does. And the other thing about this matchup is that, yeah, AD is a great one-on-one post defender, but he is a better rim protector, pick and roll defender, help defender. And so the more that he has to be singularly devoted to Jokic, which will be his requirement. I mean, people can concede the Jokic pick and pop, but he's going to make 40% of his threes, right? And at the very least, you're going to have to respect him from that free throw line area where he can just make 60% of his floaters or more. That is going to, I think, limit some of AD's defensive dominance in the scope of the team. And the reality is, I think a lot of Lakers fans maybe look at the Warriors and have a deeper respect for them organizationally than the Nuggets because obviously they've proven more, but the Nuggets are a much better team. And you are not going to walk into a scenario where it's like, okay, there is one dominant offensive player, but on any night, everybody else could just be missing shots. This is one of the best shot-making, most complete offensive teams in the league. I mean, from the bubble, obviously, if you're a Lakers fan, what Jamal Murray accomplished there. He's better now than he was even at that point, and is a special pull-up jump shooter liable to explode on any night. And then obviously you have like one of the best spot-up shooting duos with KCP and MPJ, probably the best in the league. And Aaron Gordon obviously is an awesome complement offensively in every way, who also is a better matchup for LeBron than anybody on this Warriors team, honestly, because of his size and length and ability to still be physical. And I think they're going to need really good LeBron if they want this series. If we got Game 6 LeBron for 7 straight outings, I would take the Lakers to win. But it's narrow, and I just trust the offensive formula from Denver more overall. I really like Reeves and D'Lo, but there are times where they're going to be relying on the difficult shot making, and it's going to leave them. They also, as these bigger guards, at times have been able to easily maneuver their way to their spots. And I think with Denver, you're looking at a couple of bigger guards as well who are capable of perhaps guarding them a bit better with Jamal Murray and, of course, KCP. I lean Denver in 7 right now. I also think home court actually matters here. Denver's 37-4 at home when Jokic plays this year, and they just have the biggest home court advantage in the league because of the altitude element. It's going to be a hell of a series. Again, we will go into more depth in a couple of days, but let's just stick with Denver for now, because obviously they put away Phoenix. Any other takeaways you want to talk about from that performance?
A lot of similar things that you said. I mean, Jokic, what I think is so remarkable about this series, going up against Devin Booker and Kevin Durant, yes, he's consistently the best playmaker on the floor, but in a series against two of those guys, two of the best stone-cold buckets on the floor, was consistently the best scorer on the floor, and that's something that I think people need to take away. Let's say that again. In a series with Devin Booker and Kevin Durant, the best scorer on the floor was the big goofy-looking white guy who, rides horses in his spare time. Shout out, dude. I mean, I just don't think people recognize that enough. That's a big-time accomplishment, dude. I thought D-Book and KD were the best scoring duo, period, point blank in basketball that you can throw together, and it didn't matter. Jokic was consistently the best player on the floor. Like you said, man, 31, 13, and 10 in this playoff run on 63% true shooting. In his playoff career, as you've noted a multitude of times throughout this run, 27, 12, and 7 on 61% true shooting. Only 2 other players have even averaged that in individual runs. That's Big O and Russ. Only 6 players have averaged 25 and 7 in their playoff career. Only 5 guys have averaged 25 and 11. Like, Jokic is he's just the shit, man. He's just a complete offensive hub, man. I would just want to rain down so much praise on him. But again, the big takeaway is this is what we laid out throughout the regular season. That if all of these factors lined up, because the thing that made the Nuggets stand out from every other team was we had seen it consistently, and we had seen them do it with regularity throughout the regular season. That was why we were skeptical about Golden State, and you saw Steve Kerr say that in the presser afterwards. We didn't do this consistently during the regular season. This was never a championship team, and that was a conclusion that we reached. The Lakers, strewn together with half of a season to really gel and come together. And the playoffs were the first time we really saw them at full health. The Suns, the same thing. They play 8 games with KD and D-Book. The Nuggets had the consistency edge, and we knew what it was going to take for them. Best offense in basketball. They've done that in these playoffs, with Jokic being far and away the best player, I think, in these playoffs on a consistent level. Superstar Jamal Murray, dude, 26, 6, and 7. 93rd percentile as a pick-and-roll ball handler, bro. He's averaging an absurd 1.14 points per possession in these playoffs. It's nuts. 45% off the catch, 52% on pull-ups, 56 on fades, Carson. Like, we are getting sub-superstar Jamal Murray. We needed that. The spot-up shooting. MPJ is a 42% catch-and shooter. KCP is 43%. Christian Brown's at 50. Bruce Brown hasn't shot that well, but he's made himself more effective in other ways. Like, they are deep. They are consistent, and they've had this formula all season long, and that's something that I think we take for granted, man. Like you said, in the NBA where stars are moving so fast, it's how can we bring all this talent together? Sometimes you got to build it up, and you got to be consistent, and the Nuggets have been doing this for, a solid 2 years now, and the continuity edge matters. They've been doing it consistently. They had the formula, and that's what I think we've seen. They don't have to be a great defense. They're the anomaly. They are the only anomaly. Great defense has led to championship-winning basketball over these past years, but I think the Nuggets can be that anomaly that can win a chip with an average defense. And I'm not confident in that pick. If we're being honest, dude, it's a toss-up. I could flip a coin, and it could be different on either given, any given day. I don't know. I think Denver does great things that LA can't do. I think LA does things that Denver can't do. But Denver has consistently executed on that formula too and shown us why we should believe in them. That was my biggest takeaway, man, is that we should have faith on Denver, and they've been undersold throughout these playoffs. All these other storylines, man, I still feel like not like Denver's a sleeping giant. We've seen it. We're just not talking about them enough.
You can debate who has the highest ceiling in this playoff field. I think clearly the 3 contenders there are Boston, LA, and Denver, and I actually think that Boston and LA arguably have the 2 highest ceilings. Like, when we get this version of LeBron with this level from the guards, with this defensive level from AD, everything we saw in Game 6, man, it is tough to say that anyone's better than that. And when we get great shot-making, Tatum and Brown with the level of impact that they get from their guard core, with the defensive ceiling they can reach dialed in, they're just the most talented team in the league. But nobody approaches the consistent greatness right now of this Denver team. And I think it's because they're just so easily the best offense in basketball. Best offensive rating in these playoffs, best offensive player. We talked about how great the supporting cast is, and that ultimately was a huge difference in this one. I mean, neither them or Phoenix was well equipped to defend the other, but they were able to create great shots in the paint from Jokic and great shots on the perimeter for all of their supporting pieces. They were able to attack mismatches with Aaron Gordon at times, and the Suns, it just felt like, were repeatedly reliant on the difficult shot making of their 2 stars. And listen, Book, although he faded in games 5 and 6, which was disappointing, was so perfect effectively in the playoffs up until that point. I will not say a bad word about that man's performances. Like, he's the reason that they were in this series. They were outmatched. They were pretty clearly outmatched once we got into the swing of this series, and yet his superhuman performances kept them alive, both as a scorer and a playmaker in games 3 and 4. That man is looking like a top 10 player on the planet, and it's just incredible the versatility that he has as a scorer and his growth as a playmaker. And he completely outplayed KD, and that's why I think KD does deserve some accountability in this Suns disappointment, because although he is far from the biggest problem, right? The biggest problem is that this wasn't a good supporting cast. It wasn't the KD that we had come to expect from how great he was in this regular season. I think arguably the best regular season of his career, with the defensive level that he reached as a rim protector, with the playmaking level that he reached out of pick and roll, and then still being the same brutally efficient, dominant scorer night in, night out. And I thought we saw him again, affected by the length and the physicality of Aaron Gordon, affected by the feistiness, the ability to move him off of his spots, to get up in him and affect his jumpers of the smaller, feistier guys, KCP, Bruce Brown, Christian Brown. And so, of course, he's still going to put up big, gaudy, raw numbers because he's Kevin Durant, but it just wasn't a good series from him. He goes out shooting 45% from the field, 22% from deep, got some meaningless garbage time buckets in games 5 and 6, really, once they were out of it. So I was disappointed because I thought that he was a guy who belonged in the best player in the world conversation. I thought coming into the playoffs, there were 4 guys who could claim that title: Giannis, KD, Jokic, and Curry. And I think that the guy who clearly, right now at least, does not belong in that conversation is Kevin Durant. And I was disappointed by that. But, of course, you don't have CP. We talked about why I don't really think that that matters. I mean, he just wasn't the level of shot maker you needed, and then with him being a defensive liability, not the most willing catch and shooter. Ayton obviously doesn't play in this one, and there's a drop-off from him to Landale, but at the same time, he was the man who everybody slandered throughout the playoffs because he just wasn't playing that well. So I don't think you can point to those things as being the reason that this was such a slaughter. I think, especially when you get the monster campaign game, the Nuggets were just that much better, and now the Suns have the task of, how do we build this roster back up when we traded all of our best role players to get KD, when we obviously gave up a lot of draft capital to get KD? I still like the move from them, honestly, because they were not a very good basketball team this year before KD. Now, I will say they were pretty good when Book played, but with CP's regression, it wasn't a title team. It was never going to be a title team. As good as McCown, Cam Johnson can be, and if Jay Crowder actually wanted to play for this team and was good, they could not compete with the firepower of a Denver like that. They could not compete with the two-way ceiling of the Lakers. So they ended up still not doing it, but they took a swing on a top 5 player, and I still do like that vision. But KD had to be better in this one. This is now 2 consecutive postseason disappointments from him after maybe the 2 best postseasons of his career in 2019 before he got hurt, and then 2021 with Brooklyn where he was just spectacular. I still believe in the guy, absolutely, but how do you feel about the Suns' outlook? How are they going to turn this into a championship roster? Is that something that they're going to be able to do?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, Carson, is what do the Suns do to rebuild this roster up to championship contention? I think they can do it, and it's because they went out and they got Kevin Durant, and he had the best regular season of his career. I think if you're going to be concerned about his performance, I wouldn't be. He shot 77% inside the restricted area. I mean, the numbers from him this season were insane. He's 56% out of the mid-range, 52% on pull-ups, 57% on fades, and it was the most efficient 29-point-per-game season of all time last year. And so I don't think he's as dominant as Book. I think Book is probably better at this point and can just effortlessly create offense at a higher level for you.
Really? You think that going into next season?
I just think that KD showed us I think his handle needs to be a little tighter. I think he needs to be better as a playmaker. And I just would probably trust, Book is a complete offensive engine a little more. I think KD, we saw him settle a lot more in these playoffs, and I think Book is just better at getting downhill a little bit more, in my opinion. I know KD, forced his will on the game a couple of times, but consistently is the name of the game. And I understand, if I'm going to be worried about anything with KD, it's about health. He's missed 109 games of the past 237 that he should have played in. That's the last 3 seasons. That's what I'd be concerned about. And there's been this narrative going along, Carson, that we're so reactionary to what happens right here and right now. And so many people, this could be a disastrous trade for the Phoenix Suns. I think if you're going to be mad about the Mikal Bridges trade, the thing that you should be mad about is they didn't give up DA. And I would go back and I'd do DA for KD straight up if I could, and I would have tried to have kept McCall and Cam or one or the other.
You weren't doing that. You would have had to swap McCall for DA, basically.
I think you're right. I think you're right that you would have had to have done that to get for the Nets to go ahead and go through with that deal. But it's like, guys, I love Mikal Bridges. I love what he did on the back half of this season. Everybody's always KD with defense. No, guys. McCall is not touching him, and KD puts this team in championship contention. So what do you do, right? Because you need those two stars. You need KD and D-Book to put you over the top, and that's why you bank on this team. Because I think both of these guys can be great during a playoff run. I mean, the answer's staring us in the face, Carson. You're paying two dudes $30 million a year next season that you need to get off the books to retool this bench. You have to move on from Chris Paul or DeAndre Ayton, and I don't really know how you do it. DA is one of the most frustrating players on the planet. Watching him in this run not be as physical as he can be, never going up hard with the ball, settling for mid-range jump shots right immediately off of the catch, not even taking a reset dribble, not even taking a dribble to get to the rack or make a post move, just taking a mid-range touch shot, not being effective defensively, not being great on the boards, not hustling, not being self-aware. DeAndre Ayton's a very flawed player. At this point in his career, so is Chris Paul. They're just not guys you should be paying $30 million. So you got to figure out how to get off of them, and then you just got to retool the bench. Like I said, I believe in D-Book and KD as the top two guys. I think they can make it work, but you got to get the surrounding pieces better, and you have – the biggest thing the Suns need, in my opinion, Carson, is versatile role players. That's the key word. Guys who can do multiple things. One of me and Carson's favorite things starting out when we first started doing this, you need a Swiss Army knife. You need a guy who can give you a little bit of everything. A Bruce Brown, a Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, a guy who can attack closeouts. Like a guy like KCP, an underrated thing about him is attacking closeouts. He's 82nd percent as a spot-up guy in these playoffs, as a scorer. Like he's not just good at lacing threes, playing defense. He can attack closeouts. Those are the kind of guys that you want. Because inherently, when you have a guy that can shoot, attack a closeout, guess what? He's inherently going to be able to play make too because the defense has to respect him. And so you need well-rounded guys like that, and they don't just grow on trees. That's what makes this rebuild hard. You have Damian Lee, Landry Shamet, Ish Wainwright, Jock Landale, Torrey Craig, Josh Okogie, guys that are in very pigeonholed roles, either as spot-up shooters, as defenders who are spotty shooters. And they don't do anything, at an extreme level to where you can put them on the court if it's that one trait. So, yeah, I mean, point blank, it's obvious, but they need to have a better bench around these guys. And it starts with moving off of Chris Paul or DeAndre Ayton. I don't know how you do that because I think their value's very low. When you're paying these guys this much money, they're just going to be hard to move off of. So I don't think there's a lot of teams clamoring to get, 39-year-old Chris Paul. I don't think there's a lot of teams clamoring to get very mid DeAndre Ayton on these big contracts. I don't know what you do. That's what you try to do, but I don't know how you go out and about executing it. But I still think the Suns made the right move by opening the title window and giving them options. But I don't think they're going to be able to move off of any of these guys, and I think it's going to lead to disappointment down the road. I mean, do you think there's any world in which they can move off of DA or CP?
Well, first of all, I think that CP3 is the guy to target because he has a bit more of a skill set redundancy, being a primary ball handler. I mean, Aiden obviously has his flaws. I think he's still above a replacement level center, overpaid, sure, but you do need somebody who can play legit big minutes, somebody better than Jock Landale at the end of the day. So you're going to have to talk somebody into, hey, this CP3 contract isn't fully guaranteed. There's 2 years on it after this. I don't know who that's going to be, and I don't know who it's going to be who's going to give you a legit quality role player back because, I mean, you're not getting one of those guys through free agency. First of all, they don't have the cap flexibility, and there aren't really many good role player wings coming available in free agency anyways. You have no draft capital to attach to Chris Paul to be like, hey, here's something we can dangle in front so we can get off of this money. So I don't know, dude. I am struggling to think of like a fix for this situation right now. Honestly, I am. They have so much money tied up in this top four, and they are so deficient in the other categories, but maybe it's going to be a deadline move next year. I don't know. Sometimes great teams just find a way. Like, how did the Lakers turn Russell Westbrook? And, sometimes you just find a way, and teams want to come play. Players want to come play with great players like the Phoenix Suns have. So the window is open because you have Devin Booker and Kevin Durant. They are also, though, a long way from where they need to be because of how weak the supporting cast is. And I think I underestimated even how much that was going to limit them. Obviously, I saw it as a concern, but the biggest problem, I think, is just that CP3 and Ayton weren't that good. Like, you know, it was faith obviously in the top 2, but it was also faith in the top 4. And then when your number 3 and number 4 guys in that equation aren't all that good, it comes back to bite you quite a bit. Okay, let's move on to the Eastern Conference here. The New York Knicks season is over. The Heat closed them out. Miami, 3rd conference finals in 4 years. How do they do it? Logan, what did you take away from this?
A lot of the similar stuff we talked about from Miami. I think it's interesting looking at this from a Knicks perspective, but Jimmy was great again, did what he needed to do. Missed some tough shots here late. I mean, Jimmy still felt like he was getting to his spots, though. I thought Bam was just utterly dominant in this series, and I think this is a series that leaned well into his skill set. You know, Bam is really versatile and is an all-NBA defense kind of guy consistently. If he's picked or if he's not, he's one of the best defensive players on the planet because of his versatility. But in this one where you don't have to really respect the shooters of the Knicks, you can force Bam into the paint a lot more and get him to take that away. It switches on Julius Randle, 8 on. You know, any time a guy came into the paint, like Bam dominated the interior in this series because he could. Again, like Bam's a great switchable guy. It's what makes him one of the best versatile defenders in basketball. But when he can afford to camp the lane and play down there more, it just leans into his skill set. I thought Bam and Jimmy deserve an immense amount of credit. And I want to give an apology to Kyle Lowry, too, dude. I thought Kyle Lowry has played an exceptional series in just big moments, making little plays. Like, it's not – Kyle Lowry's not dropping 30 pieces, but when they need a big shot, a big three, he's there to hit it. He's not hesitating off the catch. He's even like he doesn't have burst into the lane, but he can drop it off to a guy in the post and then redirect and get the ball again. He can make a floater. He can play good defense. He can hustle. Kyle Lowry is a guy I took a big fat dump on in this regular season. And I pointed to him and I said, Kyle Lowry is going to be the reason the Miami Heat can't do anything in these playoffs. He's a big contract. He's fallen off. He's regressed. Kyle Lowry has played great in these playoffs, especially with this second unit. That's very valuable. You see these second units, the Suns, the Warriors, struggle without their stars. By putting Vincent and Strus in the lineup, by running Robinson and Martin more with the first guys too, Lowry has really done a good job with this second unit, and I think he deserves a lot of a credit. But it's great pick and roll shooting, a lot of drop coverage in both of these series. The Heat just lacing them from deep when they need to, and then hustle and effort, man. I called these guys a swarm of bees last episode, and it's true. They're number 1 in deflections. They're number 1 in loose balls recovered. And if there was a stat for just hustle, the Heat would be number 1 in it. The Heat hustle. They bust their ass. They play Heat culture basketball, and that's what's got them here. It's a lot of the same keys that we've laid out throughout this entire run, but shout out them for being the first 8 seed since the 99 Knicks to get here. It's a massive, massive accomplishment. We both foolishly counted them out along the way multiple times, and they have continued to persevere. I don't think they've been the toughest of matchups, if I'm being honest. We saw the Bucks and Knicks stagnate. I think the Bucks I was a little more impressed with, but we saw both of these offensive stagnate a little bit with their worst tendencies, but I also think the Heat deserve credit for their effort there and the adjustments they made throughout the series with Eric Spoelstra. But it's the Heat culture, it's the Heat way, and it's a way of life. It's something that, again, we rarely see in these. You need star power, you need overwhelming talent, all the Celtics. Guess what, man? If you've built up a culture and identity for a couple of years, the Denver Nuggets, the Miami Heat, they have these identities that they go with and they turn to, and they're just better. An immense amount of credit. And I think the biggest thing too, man, a lot of hustle, energy, and effort can get you a long way. And I think that's a testament to how Miami's gotten this far.
Dude, there was like the most Heat play ever in the third quarter of this game where I think it was Josh Hart driving and Max Strus took a charge, and then Caleb Martin blocked the shot anyways, and I just thought, man, these guys fly around. They're everywhere. They are constantly doing the little things, and obviously that makes a very big difference. You shouted out Kyle Lowry. The other guy who I want to shout out, who I felt filled a similar role throughout this series, even though his shot-making wasn't there, is Gabe Vincent. Just 2 really good decision-makers, guys who are capable of making more advanced passes, and, I mean, Gabe Vincent led to really the last meaningful bucket of this series for the Heat, where Jimmy's trapped near half court and he's the guy who catches the ball around the nail and then drives and has a beautiful little bounce pass dump off to Bam in a 2-on-1. I think that guy is an incredible example of the Heat's ability to develop talent, to progress players. He's undrafted out of UCSB. Like, the fact that he has now been one of their 5 best players and they're in the Eastern Conference Finals is incredible, but it's a testament to Spo. It's a testament to Jimmy. This wasn't a great Jimmy game, which is why I thought it was interesting that the Knicks were so committed to trapping so hard. I mean, the trap life can get the best of any of us, Logan, but like near half court initiating those traps, and it just didn't really work. 7 of the last 12 meaningful points for the Heat in the half court come off of Jimmy traps in this game. But Bam, I think, is the other guy who deserves a big shout out, because you mentioned their dynamic shooting. This was a game where they couldn't hit a shot from deep. I mean, they were 25%, and Jimmy was 7 of 22 from the field, and Bam kept them in this game at stretches. And overall, I think we saw a more aggressive Bam offensively in this regular season, and in this playoff run, it's been pronounced. I mean, 5 more shots a game than last postseason, up from 9.7 to 15, 3.5 more shots a game than that bubble run even. And obviously, he has the skill. It's not going to be consistently great offense like a face-up jumper from him or a turnaround, but he gets you a few buckets out of the post early in this game, and when they've needed some more creation, like somebody other than Jimmy Butler to step up and just get themselves a bucket, I think Bam has done well in that role. And in the aggregate, the Heat have been so impressive. We also do have to talk about this, though, as a disappointment for the Knicks. I think just because they had the talent advantage. They never looked like the better team in this series, but they did have the talent advantage. And obviously, it's incredibly difficult to win a game when Julius Randle and RJ Barrett combined to go 4 of 24. And RJ was up and down throughout these playoffs. I'm not a big RJ guy, but I would say this was mostly an encouraging run from him because of the shot selection we saw, his ability to get into the paint, to make good decisions, had some good shooting stretches, had some brutal shooting stretches, but when he's using his athleticism, his size like this, when he's engaged defensively, yeah, he's overpaid. Yeah, he can at times overexert himself in a game and become an offensive negative, but RJ was good in this playoff run for the most part, and I think he's a guy who you can win meaningful basketball games with in a decently big role on your team. Julius Randle, though, bro, like 16 a night on 37% from the field, 26% from deep in this postseason, as many turnovers as assists. Such a frustrating player, and a guy who I've never been a believer in. I mean, I was super down on him, even in that All-NBA season, like compared to the consensus, because he's a Knick, and yeah, it ended up not going too well for him in the playoffs, and then last year he regressed, and then this year was up and down, and I didn't think he should have been All-NBA. I thought if they were going to give it to somebody other than like an AD or a KD or Kawhi because of the games played, it should have been Lauri Markkanen, but you just see the limitations. I mean, decision-making is too liable to just go haywire, and he's too reliant on a wildly inconsistent jump shot. Logan, like that guy will shoot step backs until the day he dies. He will use his physicality just to create separation for a mid-range jumper. And there are times where it's like, brother, you're the biggest, strongest guy out there. Go and get yourself a bucket inside. And I just feel that he doesn't do that enough. And he's too much of a black hole. He's in too high volume a role just by the nature of his game, by how he does want to pound the ball and create his looks out of isolation. So I think that he's honestly the guy who has to go. At points this season, I thought, is it him? Is it RJ? I know it's one of the two of them because they're not both good enough to be taking up $60 million plus combined to your cap. I think it should be Julius Randle just because I think RJ is able to play a more complementary role. Julius Randle is going to play Julius Randle ball, and I have my problems with it inherently, but when we've seen it on the playoff stage, it has been a literal embarrassment. Like, he has been horrible consistently.
You read my mind with both of these. We can start with Julius. We saw him get exposed as the primary guy against the Atlanta Hawks, where he's the guy. You can give him the ball. It's complete isolation. There's offensive stagnation. There's no movement. It's, yeah, man, I'll stand here and I'll take 5 dribbles and then just shoot a pull-up J. And the jumper has been horrible. We have seen him, like you said, I think this is a bigger condemnation of him, right? Because during the season, you talked about how encouraging this is. You have Jalen Brunson, you have Julius Randle, you have RJ Barrett. You got 3 guys who are, should in theory be dependable offensive guys, and it's that play style and it's the inconsistent jumper. 37, 26, 71 splits in this playoff run. He shot 27% on Jays. I mean, you're not valuable as a secondary guy, as a catch and shooter when your jumper isn't hitting like that. And then you just get into the play style. Julius, at points in this series, showed me what he can do. Getting downhill, being physical, being aggressive. But It's too much bad decision making. I don't trust him as a playmaker, even when he gets downhill and gets to the rack. And I think it has led to disengagement on the defensive end where he's upset with himself and doesn't want to engage himself. I thought this was very encouraging for RJ. The only issue that I had is thank you for attacking closeouts. Thank you for being physical. Thank you for getting to the rack, RJ. That is how you maximize yourself as a secondary creator. When your jumper isn't falling, that is what you can do by being a downhill force. And he doesn't ever impose his will on the game. I never felt like RJ was doing too much. We've seen that be an issue. That wasn't an issue in these playoffs, although I will say there was a stretch in this game where the Heat go on a 19-6 run, and they put in Deuce McBride for a little bit. And I'm thinking, well, this is weird. I know Quickly's out, so we get a little bit of Deuce. And this is the moment I pointed to it. I was like, 3 straight possessions. I want RJ to take the ball and say, I'm going to do my thing. Brunson's not out here. Randall is not out here. These are my minutes to be the guy. And he looked a little scared. Looked like he didn't want the ball. And it was a turnover with Kevin Love. He hits a pull-up J, but he makes a couple other bad decisions as the lead guy. But I think he can build off this. I think the really encouraging thing for the Knicks is Jalen Brunson in all the ways he can succeed as the lead guy. One, I'll just say it point blank. I don't know how hot of a take this is. I want to see where you scale him. A friend of the show, Jason Timp, put out a poll on Twitter. Which of these guys would you want? It was Trae Young, it was Brunson, it was Ja Morant, and I can't remember who was the last guy.
Donovan Mitchell.
It was Donovan Mitchell. And I thought about it, and I said, I want Jalen Brunson because there's just a thing that you can't take away from Brunson's game. He's such a winning player. He's always going to make sure his impact is felt. In isolation in the regular season, he's an 84th percentile scorer. And that's another thing about, if people criticize this series, Carson, tell somebody else on the Knicks to do something. There were so many crowded lanes and crowded paints and help off of other guys. Brunson should be better than this if you give him a better supporting cast. He's already a great player in a bad situation. Give him better players. He will be better. 77th percentile in transition. He's a 63rd percentile pick and roll ball handler in these playoffs. 84th percentile in the regular season. Again, more space, more area to work. He's just better. And I think if you're looking at point guards in the league today, I think Jalen Brunson is the third best point guard in basketball. I think I'm taking him right behind Curry and Luka. And I mean that in just versatile ways that you can't stop him. I think it's a kind of a toss-up between him and Fox. That's who I'd really throw it up between because Fox's shot making can go. I just think Brunson can be more effective in multiple ways. I honestly think Fox's jumper is probably better at this point just in terms of consistency. It's hit or miss with Brunson. If his three is really on, he's really effective. But even when that three isn't falling, Brunson found a way to make him to be impactful with post-ups by getting down to the low block, by getting into the lane out of pick and roll. The New York Knicks have a star to build around and have a guy that they can depend on to win basketball games. Now the question is what you do to put winning superstars around him because Julius Randle, complementary piece is the farthest thing away from what Julius Randle is. And the first step is getting rid of him. And I like Julius Randle as a person. I'm very impressed that he was even able to get up to a 25-point-per-game score. That's super impressive to me. But it's never going to lead to winning basketball, and you need to win games. The Knicks, you found your star. He is on a value contract. I think you have a second guy or a third tertiary guy that you can work with. But I think for the Knicks is just retooling and seeing if you can move off Julius Randle, get that cap space, find another star, find some impact role guys. I don't think the Knicks are far off. Jalen Brunson is that guy. He has been a Nerd Sesh favorite for about 4 years now. We've loved Jalen Brunson since he took court, at Villanova on the court with the Mavericks. Brunson's that guy. He's been that guy. Now you build around him. But it starts with getting rid of Julius Randle. It's addition by subtraction. It's really that simple.
And it also is as simple as this is an encouraging season for the Knicks because of Jalen Brunson. I think he's a top 15 player in the NBA right now, and you lay out the comparison versus a Mitchell or a Ja. Obviously, those guys are, I would say, probably more visually jaw-dropping talents because of the athleticism and for Donovan Mitchell, the potential to explode as a pull-up jump shooter too. But there's a different level of composure and in terms of the variety of shot making that you get from Jalen Brunson that just matters, dude. Like, all right, well, my pull-up jumper's off. I'm going to get into the lane consistently. Oh, you guys are packing the paint because nobody else on my team can make a spot-up jumper? Well, I'm going to make 55 to 60% of my floaters and just get to that spot repeatedly. And he just doesn't go away because of that. And he also doesn't shoot you out of games. I mean, that's the tendency that Mitchell or Ja can have. They can force themselves on the game in a way that ends up being a negative. I also think, I don't know if I would say Brunson's a better playmaker, a better passer, but I like how he controls the game more. He very much plays at his own tempo, always feels like he's the maestro. And I mean, I had him all NBA this year, which I feel great about, and it was because he was so exceptional in the second half of this regular season. 28-6 on 62% true shooting after January 1st, which splits his regular season exactly in half. And then in the playoffs, 28-6 on 59% true shooting, and you have him on the best value contract in basketball. So I don't know what it is that you do with Julius Randle. Again, I don't know who wants him, who you ship him to parts for to get these like quality role players back. You're certainly not going to get a star in return for Julius Randle. But if you can't get more quality role players, I don't know. Maybe you're not a contender, because they do probably need one other legit star creator, but we have to give props to the role players. I mean, Josh Hart obviously had so many awesome moments. Mitchell Robinson had so many awesome moments. Quentin Grimes had awesome moments. Like, it's a really good basketball team. And Jalen Brunson is an incredible piece to build around, given how good he is and given the value that you're getting right now. So the Knicks do need to move with some urgency here, because I just don't want to see like another 2 years of Julius Randle messing things up for them on the biggest stage, and then it gets to the point where, oh great, well, Brunson's still great, but now we don't have the same value contract and it's that much tougher to contend.
That's the one thing that I want to add about what you said about Brunson that I think differentiates him from these other guys. On any given night, any of those guys can go cold and absolutely kill you. Brunson acts in the half court and in the offense in a way that just completely flows, where it doesn't ever feel like he's dominating the ball. He's capable of playing off ball. He's capable of making a pass and making a cut and relocating in ways that, Ja can just impose his will and take you out of a game. So can Donnie. That's the biggest thing. I never feel like Jalen Brunson is dominating the ball in a way where it's not conducive to winning offense and where it's going to kill you and take you out of a game. And it is. It's crazy value. And to think that the Dallas Mavericks would have had a guy like this on, $12 million a year? That's crazy to me. Brunson is insane. He is... where does he, in your rankings, among those guys I listed, would you have him third? Do you think he's top 5? Because I don't think you take him over Luka, obviously. I don't think you take him over Steph. Do you take him over Fox or Ja?
I definitely like him more than Ja. I don't know how we constitute a point guard in today's positionless NBA, but I would consider SGA certainly more of that than a 2. I mean, he's a primary ball handling guard. At the very least, we can call him. SGA is clearly better. But Fox versus Jalen Brunson is really, really tight, dude. I think they are probably literally right next to each other in my player rankings, and I think it's probably somewhere between 14 and 16 in the league. It's tough because Fox has such a ridiculous downhill ceiling when he's dialed in. I don't know why you're making me choose like this. Honestly, I think De'Aaron Fox is a tiny bit better, but like that is the definition of nitpicking. I don't know. Like I would say, let's see next season. Both guys had awesome postseasons. Both guys helped their teams who haven't had awesome seasons very much in the last 15 years have awesome seasons. So shout out to the Knicks, but bigger shout out to the Miami Heat, who are the ones still standing. Speaking of still standing, Logan, we got one series headed to Game 7. The Boston Celtics survived despite a Jason Tatum disaster class in the first half. What'd you take away from this? What are you thinking going into Game 7?
I'm ready for whatever. I'm ready for whatever version of the Celtics we get. Guys, Jason Tatum has been so bad. My grandmother called me to congratulate me for graduating the other day. She calls me, we get all that out the way. Very informed on the basketball world. I love it. Both of my grandparents are always plugged in. She asked me, Logan, what happened to Jason Tatum? And I go, Granny, I've been wondering the same thing. I don't know. I'm trying to figure that out myself. Tatum has been abysmal in the first half and in the first quarter of these past 3 games, as that has been the biggest storyline in this series. 0 of 15 from the field, 0 of 6 from deep in the first quarter of these last 3 games. He's 4 of 30 in 1 of 13, or I think it's 1 of 15. I can't read. 1 of 13 in the first half of these last 3 games. Abysmal. Now, I will give Tatum a lot of credit for making himself effective in other ways, as we've seen consistently. Some guys would put their head down, would tuck their tail between their legs, and be ready to pack it in when their shot is not falling. He's played good defense. He's playmaked well. He's gotten better at getting downhill, and he's rebounded well. Like, I want to give Tatum a lot of credit for all that, but it's not going to give you a complete pass. Tatum, it helps the offense get into rhythm, and it just will help you put this team away. I don't think the Sixers have been better. They have been lingering. They've been lingering. And this is where great teams put bad teams away. That is by Tatum being better. It's also by the rest of this team shooting well. Carson, these are the numbers out of the teams remaining from this series. So these rankings are out of the 8 teams that were in the semifinals. The Celtics shot 39% on wide open shots in this series. That's 6 out of the 8 teams. 42% on open shots. That's 7th out of the 8th. And off the catch, these are open looks. You were getting off of the catch generated by great drive and kick opportunities. Tatum 35%, Smart 35%, D. White 32%, Grant 31%, Horford an abysmal 25%. They're just not shooting well. I want to give a big shout out to Marcus Smart for this last game. Was consistently, in my opinion, the best player on the court. Just most consistent, at least. Getting downhill, doing his thing, keeping this offense, just getting a tough bucket when you need one, because they would go into these huge lulls. I like to switch to Horford and Robert Williams. It gives you another guy to throw at Embiid, another help side guy. Rob's a good defender. They were plus 18 in Robert Williams' third minutes. And I think it energized the team too, Carson. Like, the Celtics said it themselves. It gave them something to look forward to, a change. That's something that you don't really account for, I think, in these playoffs, is like the mental part of it. I think it gave the Celtics, we made a change. We're going to do something about it. And they were better. Way better defensively. But like I said, I thought in a multitude of ways, I thought Boston let Philly off the hook by not being better earlier, by forcing this to go down late. Tatum has to go 4 or 5 in the fourth quarter. I also think Philly, I asked myself on the TV, and they padded this stat all over ESPN after the game. Embiid's final touch comes with 4 minutes in the fourth quarter. I don't know when his last bucket was. I was screaming at my television, where the bleep is Embiid? Where is he? There's 4 minutes left in this game. He's your best offensive player, and you've got Harden just coughing the game away. Go to Embiid. Go to Maxey, who had a really good game in this one. Do something other than Harden just giving it to Boston. Abysmal offense late by Philly, and that is just not by going to Embiid. I think you have to do that. So what am I looking for in this game? I want to see if Tatum can look like he hadn't just rolled out of bed in the first half, hit a shot, get this offense into rhythm. And I want to see Philly. Consistency from both of these teams is just the biggest thing, man. Probably Boston more than anything else, though, man. I'm really scared that we could get a Boston dud. Boston has turned up and shown up when they needed to. Last season, when their backs were against the wall against Milwaukee, came up big. In this series, Tatum wakes up right at the last minute to put this team away. But Boston scares me like no other team has, and I am really afraid that we could get an absolute dud from them. They're not shooting well. They're not engaged defensively. Embiid and Harden eat out of the pick and roll. Maxey pulls his weight, and nobody shoots well, and they're settling for threes. That scares me to no end. I don't want to see that, but I've seen it a lot out of Boston, and that scares me. I hope they go to that new lineup, though, more. Try to play a slower pace. Try to slow this game down and lock up defensively. That's what I think Boston should do. But like I said, man, they scare me like no other team, man. They're so inconsistent.
They are, but they're also clearly better than Philly. And Game 7, I think we're getting good Boston. Maybe I'm foolish, but this felt like the potential disaster for them because of how bad Tatum was just as a shot maker. And I agree with you about how well he's done impacting the game in other ways in these last few. But, an 0 of 10 start is a pretty brutally difficult thing to dig your way out of as a team. And he does have some issues right now. His finishing in this game, first of all, was just trash. I mean, he was 1 of 5 inside of 5 feet, but he's not creating clean looks. He's just not getting good separation. And Tatum's always going to be a difficult shot maker because he's not going to explode by you a lot. He doesn't have that kind of high-end quickness. I mean, he can drive using his size and his strength, and then it's going to be a lot of tough pull-up jumpers or catch-and-shoot jumpers, and when his jump shot's not there, he's going to really struggle, and thank God it finally came back in the fourth quarter, and he's able to knock down those 4 threes. So I really do appreciate that he stayed competitive and that he didn't fade away in this game because that matters, and it did keep them alive. But it just feels like with him, there's always the possibility that some key to his game is going to be missing on the biggest stage. Like last postseason, it was his scoring consistency inside the arc and his decision-making, right? He was 45% on twos. He struggled for mid-range, didn't get downhill at the highest level. And, of course, we've talked about in his losses, he was, close to as many turnovers as assists per game. And now it's this consistent struggling from beyond the arc, seemingly a confidence thing. I don't know how you miss. I mean, he goes 0 of 8 and then 0 of 6 and then 0 of 10 to start 3 consecutive games. That's just got to be mental to some extent. So it concerns me. But I think the positive takeaway from this is that they won this game anyways, and it's because of everything we've talked about. They're just more talented. Like when Marcus Smart can ball out, when Malcolm Brogdon can step up, we know what Derek White is capable of, even though this wasn't a great game from him. They're just better. And Philly is so reliant on getting a version of James Harden that you can't rely on night to night. I mean, 2 of these games that they've won, he has been superhuman. And they won by 1 possession. A James Harden game winner both times. And those are both games that Boston should have won if they had been engaged and dialed in. Like, there's just a gap. And when Harden is, whatever he was, 4-16 again in this one, which is like almost copy and paste 3 different games this series, as people say he's shooting concert dates out here. He's shooting tour dates. Like, he still played well in this one. He created good shots, but you can't survive with that. And Embiid hasn't been dominant enough offensively. And I like the 2 big look, too. Horford's done a good job on him in single coverage. But, yeah, having that additional help, having that other body, obviously just Robert Williams in the non-Horford minutes, too. It's good stuff, but this was an embarrassing fourth quarter offensively from Philly. You put up 13 points. Tobias Harris was nowhere to be found. 2 points in this entire game. That's one of the better fourth options in the league. He's got to be able to step up. Maxey was good, but I have more faith in the totality of Boston's roster, and I think we can so directly attribute a majority of their struggles in this series to effort, to engagement. I just don't see that biting them in a Game 7. Like, I don't know. I just have faith in a team. I mean, Tatum, yeah, it can scare me, but the Smarts, the Horfords, the Derek Whites, these competitors, I think, when it comes down to winning time, they will do what it takes against a team they are better than, whose stars have not been consistently great enough to compensate for the fact that their role players are starting as good. Like, Philly's depth is good. It's not Boston's depth, which is some of the best that we've ever seen. So I think they do dig their way out of this, and you know what? I'll be proud of them because I was very hard on them after Game 5, and they deserved every single word of it, and I would like to see them change the narrative and prove to themselves that they can win in these tough situations where they're not just gliding by off of massive talent advantages.
That's fair. I can't say that you say you have faith in them, and that's just the word that I just won't go to. Faith was the reason that I didn't bet on the Philadelphia 76ers, because I bet against Harden being great, which he's had 2 games. And again, like you said, they've eked out those wins. I bet against Embiid in the playoffs. Embiid's been better, hasn't been great. Yeah, I think Boston's a better team, but I wouldn't say I have, faith in them too. Last thing, yeah, man, the thing about Tatum too, dude, I don't get too in the weeds here, man, he's blowing open lays. Like, smoking open lays too, dude. I think there is a mental component. But if Boston can get rid of that mental component, if they can just get this, I don't know, fog or funk that I feel like is on them, man, I think they can bounce back. The one thing, though, if Boston gets through this, Carson, they cannot do this against Miami. They cannot do this against Miami. If you sleepwalk through games, you will lose them. I do think Boston is the better team. I just want them to show it to me. Show it to me, Boston. Come out, whoop that ass. I think you can trounce Philly. Like, I believe in that. I think that if Boston is fully engaged, they can crush Philly. I want to see a statement win from Boston tonight, but like I said, I wouldn't bet on it because I don't have faith in this team.
I don't have faith in Philly either, is I think a big distinction. As a basketball fan, you got to want to see Boston to reach the finals. I do. I just think that that's going to be the highest caliber series. So we'll see if they can pull it together. But again, what we talked about, while everybody else is elevating their game on this playoff stage, Book, Jimmy, AD, all these guys who are not just like first-team All-NBA home runs in the regular season, but stepped up in a big way in this playoff run. Tatum's the guy who's gone from 30 a night on 61% true shooting to 26 a night on 56% true shooting in the playoffs. And it's a disappointing trend that hopefully he can overcome. So we'll see how that game plays out. That's going to do it for us here today, guys. As we said, we will be back early Monday. We'll react to Game 7 and we'll spend most of our time previewing the conference finals in both conference, which I cannot wait for. So stay tuned for that. And if you guys enjoyed, then for your own knowledge, you can find us on YouTube on the Volume page, or you can listen to our podcast across all audio platforms. You can follow us across social media, TikTok at NerdSesh, Instagram, same handle, Twitter at @nerd_sesh. And you can join our Discord, which is at the link in our bio, anywhere in our link tree, just to talk ball with us. That's a place where you can have a more direct line of communication. So that's where you can find us. Shout out Logan over here. Just graduated from ASU. That's why I'm here with him in person. Class Bingo Dictorian awarded to the most fun GPA. So a big acknowledgement for him. So with that, as always, I've been Carson Brabber.
I've been Logan Camden.
And this was Nerd Sesh.